At least one.
At least one, yeah. I'm just going to keep it very brief because I want to leave as much time as possible for our discussion of these very crucial texts. An enormous thank you and welcome to Khalil Habib from Hillsdale College, who has agreed to come and lead us in a discussion of Federalist Papers 1, 9, and 10. I just wanted to say that as we just embark on our mission in the center to cultivate a discussion of the ideas and texts and traditions that have shaped the American constitutional order, that we truly believe that the best way to learn is to do the kinds of things that we're doing right now, to sit across the table from one another around a common text and a common set of ideas. And this is the kind of thing that we hope to bring a lot more of to Cleveland State University. I know that there's already great professors here doing just that, but the more of it we believe, the better. And so we couldn't be happier to have Khalil here with us today and to lead us in this discussion. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I'll turn the floor over to
Peter. Thank you very much. Actually, Kishore, can I ask a favor?
Yes.
I forgot I do have an outline. This is the outline that I use. It's very primitive, but it's enough to kind of keep us on track. Would you mind making copies of these? I'm sorry, I just saw them hanging out of my book. I realized. And I'll just filibuster that. I don't know everybody here, obviously, and I don't know if everybody here knows everyone in this room. So if we could just quickly go around and tell me who you are, what you study, what you do, and if you've studied the Federalist before.
Nick Zingali, I'm an associate professor here in the Urban College, teaching public administration, but I do a lot of work in advanced technology, working with cross-disciplinary teams, primarily with AI, robotics.
Oh wow, talk about relevant. Are you
Yeah.
scared of the future or optimistic?
It depends what lane you're in, but certainly, I see certainly the AI and spill over into the economic issues that I think are at bay.
Yeah.
Anybody who's been following how data centers, for example, are being financed should be concerned.
Yeah, man. I wish we could have a seminar on that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll admit I'm terrified, but we can save that for later. Yeah.
Stan Molchanov, I work on European political thought. I've had many encounters with Federalists.
In person.
Very good company.
Yeah, you knew Hamilton.
So Montesquieu is the one that gave Hegel the idea that there is a spirit that dominates an age. I think that accounts for like the holdover of all this German idealism in the 19th century in the United States. But that's for a different seminar.
I would love to continue that. Yeah, he inspired, but it's a distortion of Montesquieu. It's very different. Yeah, this reason isn't necessary. Logos doesn't govern.
We don't have to go
For
down that.
Montesquieu. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm Maria Goyette. I'm a pre-doc at the Center. I study political theory and American politics, especially ancient political thought. And I have taught parts of it.
Oh, nice. The whole, all of them, or just some?
I have not taught all of them. And I have studied all of them. I don't remember them all.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm gonna make up most of what I say today.
Hi, I'm Stephen Corey. I teach in the history department. My specialty is Middle East history.
Wow.
So I have to admit I'm not as knowledgeable on the Federalist Papers as I probably should be, but I'm here to learn.
Yeah. Wow. What part of Middle Eastern history?
I do Middle East and North Africa.
Okay.
So pre-modern period mostly, but
Wow.
here I teach everything.
Yeah. Wow. That's great.
Everything from ancient Middle East to current.
Yeah.
So.
Eventually, we all become generalists, I think. I had a
We
specialty.
do.
But yeah. Now I'm
Very
everywhere.
true. Particularly Cleveland State.
Yeah. No, believe me, I get it. Yeah.
But and I'm gonna have to leave a few minutes early, so it's not.
No problem. No problem.
Hi, I'm Katrina Ponte. I am a historian of the founding era, particularly the history of politics and diplomacy. I have taught Federalist 1. I taught a whole course on Alexander Hamilton.
Palladino. I'm a postdoc at the center. I study and write on C.S. Lewis, American politics, and state and local government.
Hi, I'm Paul Kalul. I'm a pre-doc at the center, and I studied under, I had the privilege of taking several courses at Hillsdale College.
I'm
in
not
the
grading you.
Graduate
That's okay.
program. Well, it's all true though. With Dr. Khabib, so it's great to see you and have you here as our guest.
Likewise, thank you.
Yep.
I'm Clayton Leakage. I teach in the public administration program here at CSU. I also teach undergraduate classes. One is in Ohio government. In my previous institution, Texas in the Political Science Department, I've taught American government survey courses and have taught the Federalist papers within that context of survey courses.
Yeah, no, I'll take the compliment, it's okay. Thank you. You, which school in Texas?
Sam Houston State,
Oh, okay. Wow, and how long have you been here?
8 years.
Okay. Are you originally from here?
Close.
Close. Yeah, you guys are lucky.
I'm Matthew Kortinsky. I'm a freshman here at Cleveland State. I'm also an officer of the Turning Point chapter here at CSU. And Matthew Kortinsky is my father.
So you have to be on your best behavior.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you figured out what you might major in, or?
Finance is the
Finance.
current plan.
Good. You'll be able to retire early if you're
That's
successful.
right.
Yeah.
That's my plan.
Yeah, nurture that plan. Yeah.
My name is Cheyenne Dahl. I'm a student here. I study criminology and psychology. I'm also an Turning Point with Matthew.
Oh, nice.
So he encouraged me to come learn about the Federalist Papers.
I know you're gonna find them later when it's disappointing. Yes, sir.
My name is Christian Jensen. I am history, philosophy, political science studies. I'm also part of the Turning Point chapter, and I'm here to more.
Is that a program or like 3 majors?
Major and 2 minors.
Okay, wow, that's great. And you're also a freshman?
I'm a junior.
Junior, okay, cool. Well, thank you all. So as Peter said, my name is Khalil Habib. I've been at Hillsdale for about 6 years. And prior to that, I worked at Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island. And, yeah,
Yeah, I live there.
where?
Well, I live in Warren. but-
Oh, yeah, well, it's so small. Yeah. Yeah, we were there for about 15, 16 years. And my PhD is actually in philosophy, but my background is in politics. So I was a politics undergrad, politics master's, and a PhD in philosophy. And it is relevant actually to the way we're gonna look at the Federalist Papers today. And part of it is actually just anecdotal. My family immigrated from the Middle East, hence my interest in your background and your specialty. And so I was born in 1974, and the Civil War had just basically started in Lebanon. And so my family moved to Bahrain, and we lived there for quite a long time. And then we moved to Texas. That's a big country south of here, if you've never been. And one of the things that I remember had the biggest impact on me was literally, and I think it shaped the course of my education, was coming to the United States knowing that it was really a civil war and factions and the problems of sedition and party rage that basically just permeates the Middle East in general. That when we arrived here, I kid you not, I really thought I had landed in a country that had providentially emerged, because I couldn't for the life of me figure out how on earth 350 million some odd people could get along, for the most part, quite peacefully, in spite of any tensions you think we have politically. So just to give you context, yeah, I do think this talk is very relevant. Sedition, insurrection, factions are always a problem. We're gonna learn about that today. It's just a part of politics. But coming from the context of the Middle East, there are no problems. This is astonishing. The Federalists prevailed. They've managed to control the effects of factions, at least for now. And when I sought a major, I swear, I sought a major that I thought could explain to me why America was successful, because I was baffled. We had family killed in the Civil War. My father lost a fortune because of the Civil War. We lost our country because of the Civil War. And again, no regrets. I love being an American. And so I thought maybe I could explain America on economic terms. So I started off as an econ major, and it just wasn't answering the questions that I had on my mind. And it wasn't until I got into political science. And oddly enough, I actually never studied the Federalist as an undergraduate. I didn't really study them carefully until I came to Hillsdale. It's part of our curriculum for the undergraduate course. And it was there that I was able to see that the Federalist Papers are the most coherent account of the American founding in a way that nothing else seems to really do it. You can study parts of Hume and you'll see parts of Hume in the Federalist Papers, you can see parts of Montesquieu. But what the Federalists do is they articulate a very coherent account of the Constitution and what a modern republic is. And I found that to be like exhilarating. So what I wanted to do, initially we were gonna do just Federalist 9 and 10, and which we're gonna do, but it occurred to me that we can't bypass Federalist 1, because Federalist 1 does a number of things. It tackles a question that Hamilton thinks transcends the American founding. And I was really struck by that. And it rests on a moral and political psychology that's drawn not just from experience, but from political theory, but tempered with reality. It's not a fanatic utopia that they're trying to establish. They warn against those kinds of things. There's a lot of concession to human nature. And then there's an attempt to try to build a coalition and consensus around principles. But the overarching theme that I thought we should pay attention to in Federalist 1 is how the potential for us to ratify the Constitution will set not only a precedent, but it will answer a question that he thinks is ancient. So I want to just jump in, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to run it like a seminar. Is that okay? So interact, jump in, speak. Now, Paul, I don't want to volunteer you without your consent, since it is the founding after all, but would you mind?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, so why don't you start? Oh, and the outline, this is just something that I provide my students. And I'm not offering it as, in a patronizing way. It just helps us, I think, to stay on. All of the Federalists 1 through 10 are here. We're not going to get into Federalists 2 and 8, but if you want, you can keep these. But anyway, Paul, if you can just jump right in.
Sure, and let me know if you can't hear me, just raise your hand or something or make sure that you can hear me. To the people of the state of New York, after an unequivocal experience of the inefficiency of the subsisting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new constitution for the United States of America. The subject speaks its own importance, comprehending in its consequences nothing less than the existence of the Union, the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed, the fate of an empire, in many respects the most interesting in the world.
So what strikes you about that introduction? One, he obviously makes reference to the failures of the Articles of Confederation, so there's something inadequate. But what is he doing here that's really a masterclass in statesmanship? And you're going to see that he is going to weigh in on the problems of factions. Almost every paper, in a way, either deals with it explicitly or implicitly. Is there anything that strikes you about that? Like, what is he asking his fellow Americans to do? And what political theory would inform that? What do you think? Students?
He's asking us to deliberate.
Yeah, deliberate. Yeah, it's a founding that's going to be distinguished from accident and force. And so part of the uniqueness of their experience, their experiment, is this is what statesmanship is, this is what politics ought to be. It should be deliberation, and it should be deliberating on issues that concern the fate of a nation. And he's going to go into psychology of how politics can sometimes lead to just rancor, name-calling, slander, factions. But as Americans, we have to enter the fray, and you have to deliberate. And you have to deliberate about the Union, the safety, and the welfare of all of the parts. And so it's teleological. There's an end goal. We have to think about the common good, and we have to deliberate about it. And later in Federalist 1, he's going to say there's been whisper campaigns to try to undermine what we're trying to do. And if they're not addressed, they're going to end up building momentum, and then before you know it, you could have this whole thing implode. So the answer to political controversy is public deliberation, among other things. Paul, go ahead.
It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country, by their conduct and example, to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force.
So this is my favorite part. This is such an important distinction. He wants to distinguish, this is as sophisticated as I get with AI, by the way. I'm very limited. I don't know what I did with my marker.
It's on your tab.
So this is phenomenal. How is he situating the American founding? Think about what he just said.
Reserved for people.
No, it has been frequently remarked, it's been reserved in people of this country to decide by their conduct the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice. What debate is he talking about that even transcends the American founding? So you got the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists debating on the size of government, the scope of government, and before we even get to that, he says what we're going to do.
State of nature.
Sorry?
Is it the state of nature that he's trying to get at?
He will hint at that later. There's a debate between those who say that human beings can form governments through reflection and choice. And then there are others who say, no, government, this is impossible. This is what government is subjected to, accident and force. What's the difference between them? Who said that human being, think of a famous philosopher who said, when you give human beings reflection and choice, you're in a state of nature, and it leads to total anarchy. And so what's the only solution to that?
It's dictatorship.
It's dictatorship. So Hobbes would say, look, I wrote Behemoth, and I wrote the Chive, and in both those works, I show you how the English Civil War was born out of this insanity of an attempt to restore Aristotelian republicanism. And so in Behemoth, he attributes the breakdown of English society to a number of things. One, the universities. Suddenly, Aristotelianism or republicanism started to come back into vogue. And Hobbes says, I want to put an end to that. And because man cannot reflect and choose, when he does, his voice is a trumpet of sedition. That is a direct quote from Hobbes, a trumpet of sedition. And they're going to make references to Hobbes throughout. He's going to say, you know, there's some monarchist out there hoping we fall apart because it will just prove their thesis that republicanism is impossible, and government can only be really through force. Now that's putting a nice silver lining on it. Hobbes would defend himself and say, well, I'm not advocating for tyranny, I want monarchy. But what if you're not Hobbes? What's another form of government that's just coercion and force?
Authoritarianism.
Sorry?
Authoritarianism.
Yeah, the other one would just simply be tyranny. And then what does accident mean?
Without planning.
Without planning, it's a direct opposition with reflection and choice. Reflection and choice is Aristotle. At the very beginning of Book 1 of the Politics, Aristotle says that what distinguishes man from every other social being, beehives and herds, is that they can reflect and they can choose. And in fact, this word, prohoresis in Greek, is the word that Aristotle uses to describe moral virtue. It literally means before choosing, there has to be a reflection made between two alternatives, and you voluntarily choose to say, go into battle. Therefore, that's courage. And so for Aristotle, choice is a moral operation. It's a moral psychology that makes possible moral virtue, but it requires reflection. And so for Aristotle, this is possible because man, as a political animal, has the faculties to govern himself. He can govern himself through enlightenment, through consent. And so I think consent is the opposite of accident. You mentioned, yeah.
I just wanted to, something struck me about this sentence that I thought it might not be so much, I mean, it seems like he's juxtaposing this this choice
This binary.
versus accident and violence of some kind. But it's the word that he uses here is that or whether men are forever destined to depend on accident and force. And if that's true, if those people are right, then even the option of reflection and choice would be a kind of charade. Because
Right.
if we're forever destined to be ruled by accident and force, then we might think we're choosing reflection and choice.
Right.
But we're really not. We're just giving ourselves over to some other form
That is Hobbes.
of action. Right.
That's Hobbes.
Yeah.
Hobbes.
The materialist,
Hobbes' whole point, the first 5 chapters of Leviathan, is epistemology. And his whole point is to say, when you think you're reflecting and choosing, it's actually an illusion.
We're all ruled by our passions.
You're just ruled by your passions, and there's a disconnect between what you perceive and what you think you perceive. So right away, Hamilton is fully aware of every political theory standing in the way of what they're trying to accomplish. It is such an incredible work, Paul.
So this hasn't come in vogue yet as of this time, but you know, Hegel and his historical, so you could substitute history
Yeah.
for accident. So again, it's anticipating this idea that later progressives are going to say, no, you were just under an illusion when you said you
That's
could
correct.
choose this government. This is just a product of historical forces
That is correct.
that are beyond personal choosing, just like every other form of government. So when you people say that you chose that, no, that's not what happened.
No, that's exactly correct, because when we cash out this term, just like force, you can put in Hobbes, you can put in, tyranny, and there are times, and I'm going to say, there are times when this is actually necessary, like with the petty republics, Federalist 9. They would swing from freedom to anarchy, then to tyranny, then back. So there's many people you can cash out here. Under accident, which I think is really to be distinguished from, say, like consent. This is freely chosen. Accident is not. And so history, you don't really choose your history. What else might be, oh, Stan, you had your hand up, sorry.
No, I'd like you to finish this point.
Like, what else falls under accident? Like when you look at other regimes, now remember, I'm from the Middle East, I've seen a lot of the world, and how would someone, say like in Iran or somewhere, look at this? Like, what would be the opposite of consent, rationalism, freely chosen, versus accident? Like, what are some things that form nations that are a result of not choice?
Intervention.
Of what kind?
Imperial.
Imperial, what else might be?
Natural disaster.
What about revelation?
Yeah, divine, that's what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
divine intervention.
Yeah, divine intervention. And I don't mean accident meaning arbitrary, but for example, if you were in the Asherite school of thought, which dominated Islamic political thought, you know that.
Yeah.
How would they account for the basis of civilization? Would they say this?
No.
No, the Asherites
it's,
deny that. What do they say?
The goal is to follow the divine law that was revealed.
There you go. And so these are so many alternatives. So you could put theocracy, what else? And then of course, as you know, the Mutazilites have to push back against that.
They're the early philosophers.
And how do they push back against this? What do they ground their arguments in?
That man has free will.
Reflection and choice.
Yeah.
So the binary that is introduced in the beginning transcends what we're doing as American founders. He's pulling on threads from theory, theology, you name it. Now, that's not to say that there's no religion in the American founding. That's not what I'm suggesting. What they're suggesting is there's been an enlightenment, and there's been an advancement in political science, not in human nature. And we want to reflect, no pun intended, those changes. They're going to draw on Montesquieu and Locke and Hume and others. And so we got the revelation part. What else? What else could be in there? Is it Marina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that the sentence even almost implies that this moment is providential, or something like that.
Mhm.
He says,
John
it's
Jay
been
would say it
reserved
is.
to this, yeah, the finger of God.
Yeah.
But here he says it's been reserved to this people
Yeah.
to have the, it's just funny because it's actually very much limiting the possibility that choice could,
Well, yes and
say
no.
we get by, I don't know, by accident or
Yeah, yes and no. Jay will mention providence, actually. It's a part of his argument. So Federalist 2 is, well, what makes a united people? Like, if we're talking about unity, we can talk about uniting governments and institutions, but what is a united people? And he will talk about providence. But it's not providence in terms of founding. Man still has to reason, and he still has to deliberate and make use of his own faculties. That doesn't mean that we're not at a moment, in time where we can finally do this. The reason why I don't say it's providential is because when you get to Federalist 9 and 10, the time isn't providential that enables us, it's the advancements that Montesquieu and the Enlightenment have provided, but that comes up in Federalist 9. Yeah.
I have a question. When I taught at Lower College, we always.
In Newport? Oh, so that's why you were there.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would talk about not making a choice is still a choice, right? We're trying, right, you teach a student to reflect and deliberate, but you can still choose accident, right? You can reflect
He will talk about that.
Okay.
No, in Federalist 1, see, I'm glad you brought that up, because in the same Federalist paper, he's gonna say there are false choices, and we have to be aware of, we need self-knowledge. Let me just tell you what my conclusion is. This work is a work of self-knowledge and philosophy. It's throughout. It really is it's up there with Plato and Aristotle as far as I'm concerned. So I treat this very sacrosanct. He's aware of what you just said, and in the next page, at least in the Liberty Fund, he's gonna talk about the need of enlightened choosing. So there was another hand, I think? Yes, Dan.
I think it's much more than a matter of understanding or reflection. Fed 1 makes it really clear that this is a matter of practice. He says, by their conduct and example, they shall demonstrate the sort of reasoned, deliberative choice that they've made for a certain kind of government and against other kinds of government. So in the very beginning, he says that our project is to institutionalize the thing that, you proto people are already kind of practicing.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, he says it's a collective enterprise.
Correct. Yeah, and he announces, and in fact, historically, they would have won anyway. People were moving in this direction, and there's indications throughout the Federalist, they didn't really need even to write this, because the articles were so bad, and at best you only had whisper campaigns, but people were really eager to hear this. The question is, why did they decide to write it anyway? And I think you're right, to institutionalize this. Anything else on this though? We named Hobbes for this. Are there any philosophers maybe who think that the way, I am so sorry. If I don't see you, just jump in. Okay, please.
Accident would be like nepotism as well. Like destined rulers, like nepotism.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. That would definitely prevent politics. Yeah, Montesquieu talks about that. If there's nepotism, offices aren't being fulfilled on account of virtue. No, that's excellent. Can you think of any philosophers we might be able to put in here who would look at politics and say, look, you Americans are crazy. Politics doesn't spring out of man's reason, his whatever collective activity you think you're trying to show and demonstrate, that's just not how politics work. Look around the world. How do most nations develop? This was even Machiavelli's point in the Discourses. Did you guys have that with you? No? What other philosophers could you put in here? You said history, Paul. Okay, well, which philosophers would say, look, you need some epistemic humility. This thing, imagine a scale. It's right. You have reason, but there's something else that ultimately governs politics, and it's not, yeah.
Well, I think Thucydides, the fear, honor, and interest of people.
Yeah, so Thucydides, that's a little bit more complicated though, because in the beginning of Thucydides, he says the reason why this was the greatest war ever achieved is because everything in the Homeric world was through accident and force. And Pericles' funeral oration says that's true, but it was Athens and Sparta reached a level of such great civilizational achievement that they were finally able to reflect and choose. So Thucydides actually would agree, and that's why at the beginning of that work, you can really see Athens and Sparta when they're in the position to choose. Like, how many of you know the ring of Gyges from the Republic? So you have a little ring. There's a little goody two-shoes shepherd, and he was very moral and upright. And then one day he discovers a ring where if you turn the collet inwards, he disappears. And when he turns it outwards, he reappears. So when he turns it inwards, you get to see what he really wants to do. When he turns it outwards, it's what he wants you to perceive he wants to do. When did you really discover his character? When?
What book is what you're asking?
No. It's in Plato's Republic, in book 2. But when he turns the ring inside, he becomes invisible. And then he immediately frees friends from the prison, he sleeps with the king's wife, and he behaves like a tyrant. So when do you truly see the nature of something? When it's hidden or when it's visible?
It was hidden.
When it's hidden, when people reflect and choose. So for Thucydides, it wasn't until Athens and Sparta reached such military superiority that they could freely choose to do what they want with their power. When they were both a part of a confederation, actually, talk about relevancy, Thucydides shows you that when Agamemnon had his friends join him in a war, Thucydides literally says, nobody freely chose. They were all coerced because Agamemnon was the most powerful king at the time. So you want to see politics and people when they're free to choose. That's why their example is so necessary. But who else could you put in here, though, as philosophers, who would say accident?
Yeah, before I go there.
Yeah.
So something you just said is confusing to me. Maybe you can clear it for me.
I'll try to narrate it.
When
You'll get it, right?
when you were talking about the brain,
Gotcha.
and seeing the way the person might act on the inside as a way to be able to expose the true character, and then this idea that the person behaved in a poor way, but then you went, which to me is a reflection of what Hobbes would think
Yeah.
of individuals.
No,
right?
correct.
So but you quickly went to the other side and said that there, of your equation there, and you said that this is an indication of reflection and choice that we need to understand about
Right.
other individuals.
Right. So the confusion is this. That was in response to Thucydides. Now, Thucydides was a political historian, but he does think that reflection and choice with respect to national policy. Like what a nation does when it's weak is like the guy with the ring. He was weak when he was just a shepherd. Like he picks the lowliest of professions, and he behaved well because he had no power. What the ring does is by making him invisible, he gains this, like you put it, all this power now. And what does he do when he's invisible, when no one's watching? He does things he wouldn't do when he was powerless, when he has to be accountable. And so that was a point not about the Federalist, but about putting Thucydides in this camp. The reason why he writes the history, he tells us in the first paragraph, why was this the greatest war? Every other war in the past never really showed you the character of nations because they were always weak. And when you're in a weak position, like the men of Agamemnon, yeah, you went to go and fight for him. But then Thucydides says, when you read Homer, it gives you the false impression that people voluntarily chose to follow Agamemnon and it was a band of brothers and they had all this moral virtue. And he says, the truth of the matter is, they were really weak. And so if you look at ancient war, prior to the Peloponnesian War, you're gonna get a distorted view of Athens and Sparta. So what we wanna do now is look at America not when it's a colonial power. What is it when it's a hegemon, when it's a superpower? So that's when it has the ring of Gyges, and that's what he does with Athens. So that's all. That was the source of the confusion. All right, let me just fill it in there. Can anyone think? Yeah. Marx, absolutely. And although obviously they weren't aware of Marx, you're going to see there's going to be attempts to bring in something like Marxism as a way to deal with the problems of factions. Who else? Hume. Burke. What do they argue about politics? Burke's critique of the French. Yeah, Paul.
They say it just kind of grows out of tradition, and
Yeah.
each country
Custom.
is different. It has to do with their ethnic makeup and their experience and their
Which
traditions.
do you choose your ethnic makeup?
No.
I mean, I did, but did you? You didn't, right? So the things that make up politics aren't chosen. Yeah.
Doesn't Burke believe that you need a strong power to avoid slipping into chaos?
He,
The French Revolution to him was chaos, right?
yeah, it was, and he also thought that the reason why it was chaotic was they destroyed chivalry, which people don't focus on when he writes, which is really important though. So the French Revolution did a couple of things. It was too abstract. They worshipped reason, rights, and for Burke, because politics is sown through just custom, your religion, your past, you're limited, you're circumscribed by your historical precedent to what you can and cannot do. And so Tocqueville, in response to Burke, says that's the reason why it took place in the French Revolution. Louis XIV centralized authority, and for centuries actually, the centralization of authority meant French were no longer governing anymore, and they had no experience in governing, and so they were primed for radical ideas that were completely at odds with just the historical accident of how France emerged. So, but you see the difference. These guys are more like, calm your enthusiasm, curb it when it comes to politics. You don't have this epistemic vehicle that you claim you do. And they're gonna say, well, no, we're gonna settle that question. If we can't pull this off, then these guys are right. If we pull it off, then the tradition that goes back to Aristotle has some merit to it. Now, they're not gonna agree with Aristotle entirely. In fact, they're gonna break with the idea that politics should be small, we should have a small republic. But what they extract from that is that human beings have the capacity to govern, and I'm asking you to deliberate. I'm inviting you to have this discussion. So that's just the first 5 lines that's contained in this thing. I mean, to me, this is why it's work. You asked me why I only do 1 through 10. Josh, you can see now why. It took me 3 years to get to Federalist 11. Okay, so Paul, if you could, if there be any truth.
If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we are arrived may with propriety be regarded as the era in which that decision is to be made.
Do you see that? The era, so yes, there's a historical moment, but we can choose. We can choose to do it. Now, go to the next paragraph. Yeah, jump in.
Again, so, epoch, eras, like, these construct the epistemology of what shows up for people, which to me seems like doesn't allow for a clear choice, or somehow stepping outside of the conditions of all the parameters of choice.
You mean during their period?
Well, I think in all of this, to me, the argument that's being made here, this is where I'm getting stuck, right?
Mm-hmm.
The argument that's getting made here is that between accident and choice,
Mm-hmm.
it seems to me there's an assumption being made that that a human being is somehow able to step outside of the fray
Correct.
of all of the epistemological noise that's out
Correct.
there, and make a clear decision
Mm-hmm.
that is somehow closer to the truth.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm troubled by that.
Yes.
And to me, this sentence here says it. It's regarded as the era. An era to me seems to speak to an entrapment.
Yeah.
A construction, epistemological construction that's very difficult to get outside of.
I agree with you 100%, and he's going to say just the opposite. He's going to say no. In other words, you would fall under this category. Okay, what you just articulated is exactly Bergen here.
Yeah.
And they're not enemies of liberty. Let me make that clear. Just because they're under accident and force doesn't make them despotisms.
Yeah.
They're essentially saying what you just said. Okay, but it takes them. You were just more concise. But that's their argument. What I'm trying to show you is just how radical the American founding is.
Gotcha.
Okay, that it's a and frankly, Aristotle. I'm doing a graduate seminar right now in Aristotle. Aristotle has to go through book after book, as in the ethics and the politics, to debunk competing claims to this. And his version of that were the tragic writers and the poets. And so he constantly, those are his asherites. And so in the ethics, what people don't recognize is half of it is a debunking of Greek theology. Because in the Greek theology, they end either in tragedy or comedy. Tragedy because man's highest aspiration cannot be fulfilled, and comedy because it's laughable when he tries to do it. And so Aristotle's so they're following him in this regard. Now, I'm not pushing the Locke-Aristotle thing. What I'm saying is Aristotle, the Federalist, they all fall under this. Montesquieu does not fall under this. Montesquieu is a weird hybrid. It's kind of interesting. He's really more of a hybrid. But what I'm trying to drive home is this is not a boring work. This is not just another founding. This is the first time you have it in front of you. And that's why they're saying this moment. We're at a point now where there's been so much clearing. The Enlightenment now has arrived. And what you're saying is really interesting. That will become, as Paul indicated earlier, that's going to be one of the main arguments of the progressives. Okay, they're going to say, look, what reflection and choice? Actually, we should put the progressives up here too. Like Wilson, for example.
Is the Republic more of like a mix of both too? Because they have parts of eugenics and now they talk about reading, just the Guardians.
Yeah. Oh, you mean Plato's Republic?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant like the.
No, not
okay.
the Republic. Wouldn't that be a mix of both? Because they talk about like the lottery.
Wow,
like,
brilliant. Yeah.
Like reading the lottery.
What part of the Republic is accidental? Do you remember? Of the best city and speech? The myth of metals.
Right now I'm on book 9.
Oh, well then you already covered it.
Yeah.
Book 2 and 3. Aristotle, sorry, I've been teaching Aristotle. Plato. Plato says the best regime will have reflection and choice, but who gets to choose? The philosophers. But it's also founded on accident and force. So who is literally in that class because of an accident of nature? The guardians.
What do you call it, the workers of farm.
Yeah, right. And it's an accident. The myth of metals shows you that they're arbitrarily born that way. So he is a combination of both. That's excellent. You see how incredible the Federalists are? Yeah.
I think Nick's point was really interesting and worth dwelling on a little bit. But I think there's an important distinction to make. On one hand, it seems to me that Hamilton is sensitive to the fact that there is a tremendous amount of social context and conditioning to all human beings, to all ideas. And that's precisely why this is such a special moment that is worth, that it's like a little flame that we don't want to let blow out. We have this opportunity here where we do have an opportunity for reflection and choice. But it's one thing to say that that accidents and sort of just the accidents of history that are weighing upon us are very difficult to see above. And to go that next step, which is to say that no, every man is just a man of its time. Every idea is just an idea of its time. That everything is socially conditioned, and that there's never a way to see beyond a kind of sort of historicism that leads to a kind of a belief that every idea is just relative to its social context. And that, I think, is that might seem like one sort of squaring the circle there, but that is deadly. I think that what Hamilton would say, that's deadly, because in a way there's something kind of incoherent about that. Because what's the one exception to that? Well, if I say that every idea is just an idea of its time, I would have to make an exception for my own insight that every idea is an idea for its time, right? Because that's the universal claim that I'm making. So if that universal claim is valid, then why not other universal claims?
I want to follow up on that. That's really insightful, because what that shows you is if you ground on accident, what do you eventually have to rely on? Like if all claims then become arbitrary, then how do you prevail in the public sphere? Force. And you can literally see from these two intervals, like if this was music, the progressives to the modernists. Just the emphasis on power. And you can see it. This is why I always write this down, because when you see it this way, you can almost graph the intellectual history of America. It's really fascinating. Stan?
Well, actually, in defense of historicism, I would like to suggest that what Federalist 1 is saying is that we are finally ready, that the historical moment is appropriate for us to have learned all the appropriate political lessons. There is growth in ideas, there is change, and we do have all of this experience to draw on to see, the size and extent of a properly functioning republic.
Okay, so my only issue with that is there's a big difference between saying you've now arrived at the point where you can be an adult, right? From historicism. So I just want to be clear, because historicism it means something very different.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're not saying that history doesn't play a role. Federalist 2 comes out and says, guess what plays a huge role? Your history.
Right.
But you're not constrained by it in the way that the advocates on that side. Historicism makes epistemic claims about what reason. This is Nick's real point, but if I understood it correctly, where the response is epistemic humility. Like you can't pierce through that cloud. That's historicism. But they're not saying that, in fact, 9 is explicitly gonna say, there has been progress in the Enlightenment, not in human terms. Humans are still the same rascals they've always been. But we now have it with the ancient, but Montesquieu in book 11, which is why I always include it, Josh. Montesquieu says the ancients didn't even have a conception of monarchy, because monarchy is a certain kind of power, and they just didn't have it. It wasn't until the Germans, which is an odd argument that he makes at the end of book 11. But now we're at the point where we now learn from experience. So for them, it's more of, we've arrived at a point now where, one, we're able to do it from scratch. Here's our moment, we can actually found.
But it's not from scratch. It's not ex nihilo.
No, they're not. They're going to say that it's derived from principles of natural right, so it's not ex nihilo.
And the last thing I'll say is they're not suggesting that they've arrived at this political revelation. They're suggesting that they've arrived at a way to put in practice something that has been sort of deduced over time, and that practice is more supple.
The only problem with that is they say this is new and it hasn't been practiced.
Right. But they're pointing to the example that the people must make, which
Right.
must be institutionalized.
But we're on new grounds, because they say there's something that hitherto has not been done.
But
Yeah.
one of the comments you made earlier, sorry, were you finished?
Stan.
One of the comments you made earlier, was that, and maybe I misunderstood. It was early when you first started talking, and saying that maybe what made the Federalists be situated in the minds of Americans at that time was that there were some of these things that are already being put into place and being practiced. And it seems to me like there's a certain subjectivity that comes from that experience that allows the objective nature of a document to fit at that time. I think that's what I was hearing you say. It's like there was this the idea of something not coming from scratch means that there's some kind of an experiential fit.
Yeah.
that
I
seems
want to be clear. By scratch, I mean just we're in this country and we can actually found a nation. I don't mean like ex nihilo, because one of the reasons why Burke supported the American Revolution and not the French Revolution is he saw the French Revolution as trying something ex nihilo, whereas the American Revolution was actually building on a tradition of rights, and even Tocqueville argues that. So I might not have been as precise earlier on, but anyway, we've got to move on though, because I want to at least get to 9.
Thank you.
No. So Paul, does anyone else want to read or add anything right now? Paul, you good? All right, so this idea, I love this line too, because it's also pretty dense. Go ahead.
This idea will add the inducements of philanthropy to those of patriotism, to heighten the solicitude which all considerate and good men must feel for the event.
Anyone catch an odd oxymoron in there? What do they think they're combining? Yeah, how would you distinguish them? Patriotism is love of my own kind, and philanthropy is love of mankind. How do you combine those two?
I was thinking it was like, you could reword patriotism to be more of like pride, and philanthropy to be more of good.
Well, like just literally, philanthropy means love of mankind, and patriotism means love of my kind. And what they're saying is we're going to combine these two. So the question is, how do they combine them? Because they seem sort of like a paradox. Yeah, Paul.
So in the line previous, right above that, it says, a wrong election of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as the general misfortune of mankind.
Bingo.
So he's saying this, you could even, I think Katrina pointed out, providentially we've been brought to this moment. We have an opportunity to choose good government, not just any government, good government, which I'm laying out for you now in this new
And you
constitution.
can deliberate about it.
Yeah, that we spent the whole summer wrestling out, and now I'm going to defend it. We can choose good government, and if we do, we'll be an example to other countries.
Bingo.
And that's our philanthropy.
Bingo. If this is true, then other nations in similar conditions can do the same thing. And that would be an act of philanthropy. In what way do you think that that's been true? Or not? Like, in other words, they don't want to mix patriotism with philanthropy, because then you're no longer a sovereign nation. But they want the act, the example, to serve as an example, like you said, of mankind.
Would it be protecting other countries, their interests?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's right out of Montesquieu. Montesquieu says in the preface to the Spirit of the Law something very similar. So their influence is just, the way they draw from the well is just amazing. So, okay, happy will it be?
Happy will it be if our choice should be directed by a judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the public good.
So do you see how he's fully aware that biases obviously play a role? And so one of the preconditions for public deliberation is you have to be very careful of confusing self-interest with the common interest. So it's not easy. This is why politics is such a rough and tumble world, but it's necessary. There are obstacles, and those obstacles are people often rationalize their own self-interests and their jealousies, but he wants to give us and him the benefit of the doubt. Let me move. What time did you say we're done?
Well, we're an hour in.
Oh my God.
Was
So
Hamilton writing outside of a spiritual or religious context? Like, that fascinated by that,
Yeah.
what you just said there about philanthropy and patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
What came to my mind though is, isn't
Oh,
this
no, I
like
have
the
it.
type of thing that like, the Crusades?
Yeah, really
Yeah,
good question.
like, did
Yeah.
Hamilton not think about that when he was doing this?
No, he wasn't. In fact, he invokes religion in Federalist 1, and I want to show you how he does it because it's very Lockean. It's kind of pulling on some threads from Montesquieu, because one of the things that Montesquieu warns about is, I'm just going to say it, regime change, because he doesn't think there's a universal blueprint for all people. And historically, when you've tried to do that, you've actually wreaked havoc. Okay, that's right in the very beginning of the Spirit of the Laws. So he says what nations can do is through their example, educate others on what are possible. Let me give you an example. Prior to Jesse Owens beating a horse in a dash, no one thought it was possible. After he did it, there's been dozens of people who've broken it. But he didn't force anybody to get out and go run. You hear the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for him, so what he's basically saying, and this ends up shaping American foreign policy early on, that we will only serve as an example to others. That is our philanthropy. Our philanthropy isn't, we're gonna give you what we have, because if you do that, how are you bringing it?
Yeah.
Through force. And then you're undermining the principles of your own regime. And so when you look at Adams, his speeches on Independence Day were all warnings again. Like he says, go back to the Declaration, reread it, and familiarize yourself, because our goal is always philanthropy as example, and patriotism for ourselves. So, and that's a great. But can I point out where he talks about the religious section? No, I don't have the same thing you have. Do you see the paragraph where it says, "It is not, however, my design to dwell"? Okay, go all the way to the bottom. And he says the following. After he calls for calm, he's like, look, there's going to be accusations of all sorts of things from every side, but I just want you to remember this. Were there not even the inducement to moderation? Do you see where I am?
Yeah.
Okay, nothing could be more ill-judged than that intolerant spirit. That's Locke. Locke wrote a work on religious freedom, an essay on toleration, where he says the central dogma of Christianity is toleration, because anything else would just be coercion, and you can't get genuine faith or conversion through that. And he's going to remind you of it, and he doesn't want politics to become that. Look at this, which has at all times characterized political parties. For in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. So he's aware that there could be zealotry, not just in religion, but also in politics. And that's why his emphasis is always on this. And it's a gamble. He's like, we will settle this question. That starts with Aristotle, and now we're in a position to try to do it. And maybe he was wrong. Maybe we're destined to be colonies of England. But he doesn't, but for the Federalist, they're not so concerned with religious persecution. They think that was your great-grandfather's problem. That's over. Our new problem is going to be factions. And there's going to be zealots who are partisans of liberty who are going to take freedom to such an extreme that they'll have their own inquisitions. And so that's going to be the new religiosity that he's concerned with. Let's go to 9. I'm sorry, I lost track of time. See, I live in relation to eternity, Nick, so I don't think of things like, moments. So let's go to 9. 9 and 10 obviously have to be read together. They're related to Federalist 1 because this is part of their new enlightenment. And let's just go ahead and look at how it begins. And if you want, you can look at I've got the outline there if I don't get to all of them. The biggest challenge here, which brings us back to Federalist 1, is responding to the accusation that republics are inherently unstable. And so therefore, I, Hobbes, have a better solution. Stop using your tongue as a trumpet of sedition, right? There's no point in choice and deliberation. You should have monarchy. Now this is crucial. Its purpose is to deal with factions and insurrection. I love this beginning. It is impossible to read the history of the petty republics, and it should mean like small, not petty as in vain. The small republics of Greece and Italy, and they're drawn from the Florentine histories on that, by the way. Adams wrote commentary on Florentine histories. And why? All their insurrection and all of their factions never resulted in any kind of institutional advancement, unlike the ancient Romans, that eventually developed a republic. We're without feeling of sensations of horror and disgust at the distractions which they were continually agitated, and at the rapid succession of revolutions by which they were kept perpetually vibrating between extremes of tyranny and anarchy. This is the advancement that they're talking about. If you read ancient politics, there's no middle ground between the instability of small republics and the necessity for a tyrant to emerge. Those were the two pendulum. Why did every experiment in ancient Greece and Italy result in tyranny, you think? This is like Hobbes is reading this and saying, yeah, that's correct. He does it throughout a lot of his works. This is how he builds his argument. What did Napoleon have to do after the French Revolution? Instill.
Establish an empire.
He had to, you're right, but he had to crush people's will because the French Revolution proved to be a total disaster. Now take a look at this. This is very subtle, but he's going to talk in terms of the tragedy. If you look at the ancient world, there's something tragic about it. They're all failed republics. If they exhibit occasional calms, these only serve as short-lived contrast to the furious storms that are to succeed. If now and then intervals of felicity open themselves to view, we behold them with a mixture of regret arising from the reflection. So you don't only reflect in deliberation and in politics, you have to read political history and reflect. That the pleasing scenes before us are soon to be overwhelmed by the tempestuous waves of sedition and party rage. Now, here's his criticism. Tell me if you can see what is so deficient about ancient republicanism, because this is a deliberate break with the ancients. If momentary rays of glory break forth from the gloom, while they dazzle us with transient and fleeting brilliancy, they at the same time admonish us to lament that the vices of government should pervert the direction and tarnish the luster of these bright talents and exalted endowments, for which the favored soils that produce them have been so justly celebrated. What is his critique of the ancient republic? Yeah.
It's a shot in the dark, but would it be like they got tastes of like really good moments, and so they just carried on that kind of like way of living to give them other moments just like that? It was like yeah, we're gonna get it again, just gonna go through it again.
Yeah, well, first of all, when he mentions glory, what is he talking about here? What's an essential part of politics? Heroism. You read Plutarch's Lives, you read Shakespeare's plays about ancient Athens, it's full of heroes. But what is he saying about their glory, and how is he tracing it to the dysfunction of government?
Does it become self-centered glory? In other words, the heroes we're successful, and then everything kind of focuses on them.
That's brilliant. That's why he says they should pervert the direction. So you had the right soil for all this heroism, but the dysfunction of politics made it, one, transient, so it's fleeting, which would undermine glory. And two, it had no real direction. Why? Because there was no functional government. And so what are they looking to do then? If they can solve the problem of politics, yeah.
Yeah, well, he's gonna define for us faction in Federalist 10, anticipating that. And like you were saying earlier about self-interest, this is the problem with self-government. Just like governing ourselves, we have our own self-interests and passions that betray our own best interests. So societies that are freely governed by themselves, can be betrayed because if the majority rules and the majority is self-interested instead of ruling for the common good, then you get swept up in these tempests and they oppress the rights of the
Beautiful.
majority.
So they're not anti-heroic. What they're saying is if you build government properly, what can you do with glory? Keep it. Direct it toward the common good. You can even force them to do it by the way they're going to structure government. I mean, I just think that's just amazing.
And something to add here, and please, 9 and 10 always blend together for me, but
they do.
One of the two, they make the argument that political science is a science, and that there are these innovations now that they have created, and from representative democracy to the Senate to judges who are behaving themselves.
Correct.
And that this is the intervention that provides stability.
Exactly. And he's basically saying is, go read your history. This didn't exist in the ancient world. And when you had a good, glorious ruler, there wasn't a functional government to do anything with it. So let me put it in mechanical terms. You had electricity, but the building wasn't wired. It couldn't channel it and disperse it to the good of the building. And so it would just peter out. And then we lament this. And he says they were favored soils that produced them. And of course you can celebrate them, they were great feats. But we are going to rewire the house, exactly as you put it. No, I think this is what, for me, is just so incredibly brilliant about this. Yeah.
I just find it odd because throughout history you have, these golden ages, you have these highs and lows, but I feel like you need to have those lows in order to mark, the golden ages. So is it saying that we should just forever live in a golden age, or is it saying that
That's a really good question. The other way to look at this passage is that it was also precisely the dysfunction of government that created a condition for heroism. Like think about, for example, the American founding. They didn't even have a government. They could be destroyed by England tomorrow. And every Platonic dialogue reminds you that Athens was in complete shambles, spiritually and politically, but it gave birth to people like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. So the conditions for greatness are often conflict. But what they want to say is, okay, but we don't want this to be fleeting brilliancy. There has been advancements now in institutional order. Let's see if we can harness it so that it can actually serve a new republic.
Put Socrates to work in the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, or make him an adjunct. Yeah, he's going to be an adjunct. Does that help, or did you have something else in mind?
I don't know what that's due.
Okay.
Carry on.
Okay. Yeah, Stan.
Practically, one of the pitfalls of ancient republics is that according to Fed 9, is that they didn't know what to do with civil liberty. And so the glory of the republic kind of depended or was exclusive of the civil liberties of the people it governed.
Right. No, that's true, and he wants to attribute a cause to that.
Yeah.
What's the cause in his mind? And this is right out of Montesquieu.
It's
Much to the chagrin of the anti-federalists.
It's a kind of vanity, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's a kind of vanity.
It is a vanity, but there's even a prior cause. He said it earlier. The petty republics, the size. So right away he's going to now take up the whole, look, you anti-federalists want these small republics and you think Montesquieu's your authority? Montesquieu says just the exact opposite, if you didn't read him so selectively. His basic point is that, and this is true, Aristotle says that the liberty can only really exist in a polis, right? It's got to be small. Montesquieu also says in the Spirit of the Laws that in the ancient republics, they were small and they couldn't be big without losing their liberty. But he's not saying that that's not a universal comment about republicanism, because he's going to put together a confederated. But the point is, it has to do with size for the Federalist, because they're getting this from Montesquieu. Why is size such an issue for politics? Like, why, this whole debate is, should we have 13 little colonies, or should we have, like, the United States? I know that looks like a chicken McNugget, but let that be, in your mind's eye, the United States. If you have small republics, they're gonna be prone to factions and disturbance. But we're gonna do something like this and have a republic. And the Anti-Federalists like, you're gonna get a republic like that? No, you can't. Aristotle and Montesquieu say republics are this size. So this is another innovation. Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so he's setting up this problem, which is the first line of this Federalist 9, domestic faction and insurrection, that's the problem. In Federalist 10, he defines what a faction is, we'll get there, I'm sure, but, and then the principal solutions he lays out in paragraph 3 are going to be what he devotes the rest of the book to. These innovations in the science of politics, which we have now designed in this new constitution, which is good government if you choose it.
Right.
So, and that's line 5 of paragraph 3. The science of politics has received great improvement. The efficacy of various principles is now well understood, which were either not known at all or imperfectly known to the ancients. Number 1, the regular distribution of power into distinct departments, that's the separation of powers, we call it today. Number 2, the introduction of legislative balances and checks, because right, all they had under the Articles was a legislature. They didn't have a president to check the legislature. They didn't have courts. Number 3, the institution of courts composed of judges holding their offices during good behavior, and the representation of the people in the legislature by deputies of their own election. He explains that. And then he says the enlargement of the orbit is the other thing that is going to control factions. So we're going to deal with these problems of the ancient petty republics by dealing, we deal with tyranny by having a separation of powers and checks and balances. We deal with faction overrunning everything by enlarging the orbit. And this, by the way, is not against Montesquieu, because Montesquieu has, in another place that these other guys don't quote, he says that a confederated republic is going to preserve the excellencies of monarchy without sacrificing the benefits of self-government republicanism.
Right, and that's exactly how they take the Anti-Federalist on their own terms and say, well, since you brought up Montesquieu and you think that he's a defender of these small republics, let's read what he actually says about extending the orbit. And there you get those checks. Now, Federalist 10 will fill out how the problem of faction and sedition is dealt with without betraying the principles of liberty. But you're right, this gives you the skeleton, this gives you the bones. Yeah.
It's a quick question. Regarding your United States and then your individual small policies, I feel like in the end, you said something about how somebody, I don't know who said it, but somebody doesn't agree that having our political gas has to work. Who said that?
Aristotle.
So, I feel like, not to be like a biased American, but I feel like it would work in the sense that the United States would represent like a blanket of moral code to follow, and then the individual pulses would be like the inside, like the moral code to follow.
Right.
But they have their own
Sphere.
small polis to keep government.
Correct. No, that's Montesquieu. That's why Montesquieu. So if you didn't know Montesquieu and you just read the Federalist, I'm sorry, the Anti-Federalist, you would have just left it at, okay, this cannot be a republic. Because why would monarchy be the only way to rule over a land this big? You have to have the force to centralize authority. Montesquieu does say that. So if you selectively read Montesquieu, so like he wrote a short chapter in his book on the Romans called Universal Monarchy, and he withdrew it because he was terrified that the French king would see that it was really a critique of what he was trying to do. He wanted to expand and have a universal monarchy. And so, but we have it, it's been published. There Montesquieu says, look, if you want to have an empire like this, you have to consolidate authority. Okay, Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. Octavius becomes a tyrant. Cool, very cold-blooded, he's the Terminator machine. He just doesn't care about feelings, and he centralizes authority because Rome it's gone. Everybody agreed with that. What makes Montesquieu so incredible, though, is what you just articulated. It's not an American bias, it's Montesquieu's argument. Montesquieu's going to basically say there are advantages to both and disadvantages to both. So let's just get to it now, because we're going to run out of time. What is the advantage of a small republic?
You get to control more.
Yeah, liberty. You can control more. There's more freedom. But what's the disadvantage?
You like you said, like factions. You get
Factions.
chaos.
Here's Lebanon, which has never known peace. And here's Dearborn, which is much larger. It has not led to any disruption, and can't and won't and never will. Why?
Because it's under a federal authority.
If the population of Dearborn was here, it would just add to the complete conflict. But when you put it in a large extended republic, it dilutes it, among other things. So the advantage is you get freedom. The disadvantage is freedom is short-lived. There's another disadvantage that republics have. What's another disadvantage?
Size.
It's size, but what's the disadvantage that comes with the small size?
You have less to, like, you can defend easier, but you have less of a defense.
Yeah.
Weakness.
Weakness.
Same.
Yeah, 9 through 8 all of the Federalists in a way touch upon this. You're so small, you invite aggression. Like Lebanon has never been sovereign, in spite of the fact that constitutionally it was designed for Christians, but it was so small. Iran uses it as a proxy. When Iran's not there, Syria was. You're just too small. So whatever liberty you are promised, it's short-lived. Okay, so we know. So what advantage does this give you?
Protection.
Protection. It's very hard to attack something this big. But what's its drawback? Traditionally.
You can't contain.
So traditionally the drawback would be despotism, right? Because the only way to control something this big is you'd have to have a despotic.
That's Russia in a nutshell.
And China. And in fact, in that short work, which I taught at Hillsdale, took me an entire semester. I think you could probably see why. It was only 10 pages long. It was so subtle. And he basically says, and he's only advancing this argument to show you that, look, I have a solution. If you don't have a confederated republic, you either have a despotism that's impenetrable, or you have a small republic that's too impenetrable. Okay, so how does he solve it? How does he combine these? Yeah, articulate that. Go ahead.
He takes the the why they govern, like the big blanket, and then you put inside the individuals.
There you go. What do these little republics become here?
States.
They become states. States. And that's what you have here. And this is what the Federalists basically put forward. And they actually quote, if again I can't give you the page because do you guys see the actual quote from Montesquieu?
Yeah.
Okay.
6 on ours.
Yeah, it's very important to take a look at that because essentially what he's going to say is it gives you 6. This picture, let this stand. Montesquieu's solution, that's the Confederated Republic, gives you 6 advancements that have never ever been tried before. 1, it gives you external security. 2, it gives you internal stability. 3, it prevents tyranny. 4, it suppresses insurrection. 5, it can self-correct. And 6, it can preserve Republican liberty. It's worth reading these. We've only got 5 more minutes. I think it's absolutely worth reading. A republic of this kind, something like the United States, is able to withstand any external force and may support itself without any internal corruption. What's the internal corruption that they've been at pains to talk about? Sedition, faction, and insurrection. Now the question is, how did they do that? Like, how does that actually prevent that? Does anyone do you want to continue with this since you're thinking through its logic? How does this solution actually prevent sedition and insurrection? Real sedition, I'm talking about Lebanon, I'm not talking about January 6th. Real insurrection and sedition that would crumble it.
Individual rights.
Well, we have that, but just the picture alone, how would it look? Could a faction develop in our country? No, they say you can't eliminate it, so they can't, but we can control its effects. So why can't a real faction like the kind we have in Lebanon really emerge and just conquer all 50 states.
You still have that central power in play.
Well, you have the central power, but what role do the states play? Like, how would you get a majority that can actually effectively voting? Yeah, and representative government. And representative government will, yeah, Paul.
And we also have the Republican Guarantee Clause. So if one of the states should go so far off the rails and say, we're not even gonna have self-government anymore, we're gonna have a dictator, we're gonna have a governor who has all legislative and executive and court authority, the federal government can intervene under the Republican Guarantee Clause and say, that's not a republic, we're gonna make you a republic again.
And that's what Montesquieu calls self-correction, which is astonishing. And you can't do it in a confederation. You need a federal government to be able to do that. Why can't a Napoleon emerge within the United States? Too many checks and balances. How's he going to do it? So what this does is, and we can tie it to 10. What's brilliant about 10 is like, look, what is the precondition for all factionalism? Freedom. When you have freedom, people freely associate with who they want and freely talk about what they want, and then they can become the trumpet of war, as Hobbes says. But if you eliminate the freedom of association and the freedom of speech, you've also destroyed liberty. And so what they want to say is, okay, well, how do we preserve liberty and allow these people to still speak their minds and still assemble? We can only control their effects. So the way I put it is, imagine if those little republics are cyanide. If you put it in this, it could kill an elephant. If you put that same piece of cyanide in Lake Michigan, can it kill anything? Not really. You've allowed cyanide to exist. You're saying it's a part of the ecosystem, but we're controlling its effects.
What if you control the reflection choice?
He brings that up. He says there's two solutions to it. You can give everybody the same opinion, like political correctness. There's a code of what
or the capability of AI to create a despotic state that controls information.
I just filmed a podcast and it's coming out, and I made that same point. That there's so much internal everyone knows. Like, you can bias it in any political direction, and then you're selecting what you think is freedom of choice, but you've got a limited menu. So you think the menu gives you the real options. You don't really see that it's actually much larger in your choices. That's why I'm so concerned about that, actually. No, you're absolutely right about that. But now let's think this through, because I'm really genuinely perplexed by it. Did they offer us enough safeguards to prevent something like that? Because AI was used to destroy Syria. I don't know if people know that. Remember when Assad's regime fell? Mm-hmm. It was 10 years in the making. They used AI actually to send false messages to people, soldiers, that others had defected, some didn't. It's like a Shakespeare play. Yeah. There was an article that was written on it. But again, they thought like, oh, my goodness, we had to self-correct there. Our top brass is failing. Then the top brass heard that their soldiers were defecting. Right. And it actually created like this fog of war that wasn't even there. Could you pull that off? Now, you can do that in Syria. And my question is, and it's a genuine one, have the Federalists done obviously they weren't aware of something like AI, right? But are there mechanisms? And if there are, here's what you're gonna have to figure out. To remain consistent with the American founding, you're gonna have to balance ways to manage its effects without betraying the principles of what the country stands for. That's the tricky thing.
I have a thought on that.
Please, I'd love to hear it.
The thought on that, I think, has to do with like what we perceive to be human thought, that we have choice, reflection, and agenic thought, or agenic action.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the founders had any sense of, maybe they did, of, in other words, AI agents acting on behalf of human beings in the decision-making process.
Well, they call them demagogues. So I'm trying to make this as relevant to this discussion as possible. They were aware that human actors, bad actors, can actually misrepresent their own agenda and the people that they're representing. Mm-hmm. But how is that any different today if a human does it, or AI does it, or an algorithm does it, right? So the question is, have we arrived at a point where AI has thrown off the American founding or not? I don't think so, because you still need human factions to overthrow in any significant way. And I could be wrong, there are enough firewalls in what we have to prevent that. But again, I mean it, Nick, genuinely. I don't know. When I asked you earlier like, what you do and you said AI, I lit up because it is on my
I was just at the AI
mind.
Global Summit in Switzerland over the summer, and the third day was dedicated to this question.
I believe
Are
it.
there enough firewalls? And there was technologists were obviously in the room, but also government officials, and there was vast concern.
Yeah, of course they're concerned.
And really a sense that there isn't enough control.
The other danger that came up in a conference, are you familiar with Liberty Fund?
I'm not.
It's an organization, it's a nonprofit, and they'll fund 12 faculty to get together and do this actually,
Yeah.
over a set of readings. And one of them was Hayek had successfully convinced most economists in America that the free market has its own rules. You can't centralize authority because there's the fragmentation of knowledge. You can-
Okay.
But now people with AI are saying, well, maybe we've overcome that and now you can centralize authority.
Yeah.
So it has potential to be a techno-tyranny, a real techno-tyranny.
Educationally, what happens, what terrifies me is when you deny the student the text and multiple texts and the time and the space that they need to learn that text, to consider that, to acquire, to ruminate, to think, to develop their own ideas,
Yeah.
to connect, that you're taking the student's liberty away from them and their choices away from them by giving them a reliance. So I know that I'm taking it a step just from a teaching
Please do.
standpoint. That is quite terrifying.
It is terrifying, and what's even more terrifying is it's pretty obvious part of the reason why the Federalists wrote these, and they were newspaper. I have to remind myself that these were just for like the average American to read over newspaper. They obviously believe that an educated public is a necessary precondition for this. But if we continue to rely on AI, I think it damages civic spirit. I think it creates this false narrative. I mean, it's really.
The brain changes within 2 hours.
Of,
The brain chemistry we're looking at right now, the brain actually rewires and refunctions after 2 hours of using AI.
What? In what way?
It starts to find passive channels to thinking.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah.
Has any
2 hours.
study been done on what
Yes.
happens with
Yeah, this
repeat?
is just.
No, like with repeat use?
I mean, longitudinal work has probably not been done.
I think that's your next
Aware.
sabbatical project. Well,
No,
thank
I
you
have
all.
a buddy who's doing
What's
it.
that?
I have a friend at UNC who's doing it. He uses MRIs. So like,
Really?
Yeah, there's like screens of the MRIs and they show like,
Oh my God.
yeah.
Terrifying.
It's myobuilding
Could-
around it, yeah.
Yeah.
Could we celebrate our students?
Are you kidding? I was so impressed with you guys. You guys are amazing. Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
brilliant.
Maria, Stan, I'm thinking about my political theory classes 20 years ago. I mean, I was a wreck. I was terrified going in there. And what you did, you have experience and that coursework, and then you just bring it to bear. So just lean in and keep doing what you're doing, because I was really impressed that you were jumping in, keep jumping in. That's not easy to do.
I agree with you.
Terrified.
I want to add to that, and I meant to say this early, but this is a better occasion for it. You should get out and advertise this new program, because I'll tell you, I thought I was just going to go to college, go to law school, and what changed me, what turned me around was a program kind of like this. It was just an honors program. But once I came into contact with these books, I lit up and I felt like I was actually observing the world that was around me. And you guys are a testament to that kind of education. So I think I also congratulate you guys. Speaking of founding, you guys are founders.
pioneers.
Yeah, you guys are the Hamilton and John Jay of the organization. So I wish you the best of luck, and it was a real pleasure to be here with you guys. So thank you all. I'm in Hillsdale, so if anyone wants to visit, you're more than welcome to come. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.